Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at all Helping Parents Heal meetings is voluntary. All discussions that take place at affiliate-led meetings are confidential. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Joe. Welcome, Reverend Sue. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful.
We are thrilled that you both are here, and I'll read a short bio for both of you so that people will know a little bit more about you. The Reverend Sue Frederick, lifelong intuitive and spiritual coach, is the author of Bridges to Heaven, True Stories of Loved Ones on the Other Side, I See Your Soulmate, I See Your Dream Job, Your Divine Lens, and Water Oak. The Happiness of Longing as well, as a master numerologist, career and grief intuitive coach, and ordained unity minister. She's taught hundreds of workshops for those who seek alignment with their soul's purpose and for those who are grieving. In her workshops and client sessions, she's witnessed the profound healing of slipping into your higher self for guidance and to connect with loved ones on the other side. Reverend Sue believes that we can all connect with our departed for healing conversations, and that our consciousness is much more expansive than what we understand it in this limited physical world. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, CNN, Real Simple, Yoga Journal, Natural Health, and Complete Woman magazines. And you can visit her website at www.suefrederick.com. Joe McQuillen has been married to his wife, Sally, for 31 years and is the father of 3 children. One of his sons is now on the other side. Joe is the youngest of 10 children born into an Irish Catholic family. Although he has had 2 successful careers, Joe is at heart a blue-collar kid from Buffalo, New York. Joe is 36 years sober and a member of AA, a fact that has helped him to get close to God and helped him to carry through the dark times after Chris's crossing. Unwilling to accept a world devoid of his beautiful son, Christopher, Joe began to research the metaphysical and seek out answers to what happens next. Joe's first book, Joe and Chris's book, obviously it was written by both of them, My Search for Christopher on the Other Side, tells the story of the journey of discovery over the first 2 years. His second book, We're Not Done Yet, Pop, My Lessons from the Other Side, takes his audience to the next level of discovery and awakening. Joe speaks to parents who have seemingly lost children. He hopes to bring them comfort and hope. When Joe finished his first book, he thought he was one and done, but Chris let him know, we're not done yet, Pop. And indeed, they weren't. And his website is www.joemcquillen.net. I'll put both of those in the chat box. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Joe McQuillen. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, everybody. I can't tell you how honored I am to be speaking to you guys and be anywhere with members of Helping Parents Heal, especially doing something with Reverend Sue and Elizabeth and Irene. I can't tell you how grateful I am for everything you've done for me on my path. I'm excited about this presentation that wasn't my idea, but none of this was, and that Reverend Sue and Elizabeth said, let's talk about thin places, and it may even turn into a book, right, Sue?
That's right.
and-
There's always another book.
So there's a quote about thin places, and it says there's a Celtic saying that heaven and earth are only 3 feet apart, but in these places the distance is even smaller. Thin places not only make us feel calm, but also transform us as if we're being unmasked. While we're at these places, we're aware that we're far more than just physical beings. We feel ourselves as a spiritual being, our true essential selves, body, mind, and soul. The thin places can be found anywhere in the planet, including churches, temples, landscapes, and ancient ruin. And the French priest Pierre Desjardins quoted, in the 20s, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience. So much for calling this New Age. I want to open and just start with my experience with thin places, because it wasn't something I was seeking out. In January 3rd, 2016, my son and 3 of his friends drowned in a canoe accident at 3 o'clock in the morning. And my life changed, and the trajectory of my life changed completely while heading up to claim his body and to go up to the place. I recalled a session I'd had 15 years ago with a medium where my dad had come through with evidence that he was in fact on the other side. And so 15 years later, I thought, wait a minute, if my dad's somewhere, he's with Christopher. My first experience really wasn't, and this was my own experiences. It really was by accident. I had gone to a dear friend's wedding in the first year after I lost my son and he had transitioned. And it was only for my friend Al would I have jumped on an airplane after actually being in Tucson, Arizona for a fundraiser and a dedication at the ranch for my Christopher. And I had ducked out of the event like I had ducked out of any event that I go to any party. I do the Irish goodbye where I just quietly disappear. And I ended up on a beach, rolled up my khakis, took off my shoes. I was in Florida, so I didn't have any socks on, lit a cigar, and stood on the beach in Sarasota and felt something I had never felt before. I had felt something overtake me completely. It was Chris. I began to cry. My heart was beating and open, and yet it was heartbreaking, as my wife uses the term brutal. And it was only later on that I found out that I was on 2 beaches, one each night. One was Siesta Key and the other was Lido. And Siesta Key is a well-known thin place that I didn't know. It's quartz crystal, flown down from the Appalachian Mountains 2,000 years ago. I thought that it was, I thought it was an urban legend until I researched it. And there's something about the combination of the air, the moon, and the crystal sand that opened a doorway where Christopher could walk through. Since then, we've connected often on beaches on the Gulf Coast, and you could ask me why beaches on the Gulf Coast and not on the East Coast. I have no idea. There's some explanations that are way over my head. As Christopher has told me, since hopefully some of you know that I to this day channel Christopher at 3 o'clock in the morning a couple times a month in this room that was his bedroom. That is, it's also a thin place. That I knew that there's something there and it's connected. So Sarasota has been in Siesta Key and Naples, anywhere on the Gulf Coast is someplace that I go generally late at night and feel his presence and connect with them. The thin places in my life that are very personal to me are those beaches. The grave, I go to a grave at Sacred Heart Cemetery. I was there earlier tonight, and it's open 24 hours and it's not spooky. And his grave is there and I connect with them there. I've had mediums tell me that, of course, he doesn't live there, but he comes there to meet me. Those are my personal thin places. This room where he comes to me to channel is a thin place. My sister's house, where he was very happy, and she's with him since 2019, and with the rest of the family is a thin place. So there are thin places that I believe are personal to us because of psychic imprints. And there are thin places that we share with others, like Siesta Key, that are for everybody. Reverend Sue and I became friends all around helping parents heal. And I did an interview with her, and then we did a past life regression, and we have a connection. And we started sharing our experiences in thin places. And it's an amazing thing how spirit finds a way to get to that veil that's the thinnest between the two worlds and connects with us as long as we do our work. And I'd love to hear how Reverend Sue has encountered some thin places.
I love you, Joe McQuillen. I love your story so much. And when you were on my Mystical Conversation podcast, we figured out that all of our lives we've been connecting on Gulf shores. And, I grew up in the deep South, and my thin place has always been the beach of Long Beach, Mississippi, and Gulf Shores, Alabama, that white sand beach, just like yours. In fact, I wrote a whole memoir about Water Oak, which is all about Long Beach, Mississippi, where I grew up as a child seeing spirit. And especially on the beach of Long Beach, Mississippi, I had so many mystical experiences. But when Paul, my husband, died when I was 29, just like Joe, I started communicating with Paul right away. But the two profound thin places for me and Paul were in the mountains of Colorado, because I lived in Colorado. And the year after Paul crossed, I decided I would hike every peak in the Front Range of Boulder. And you might think, well, how many peaks can there be? Well, there were 10 within, you don't have to drive. I mean, you can drive to the south of town, but you don't have to drive out of town. And I hiked up every one of those peaks and would sit at the summit. And I found little hiding places at the summit where I wasn't around any people that were coming up there. And I would instantly feel Paul, I'd feel Chrissy, I'd feel all my departed loved ones. And then on the beach down in Gulf Shores, when I would go there, that has been incredible for me. I mean, to the point where I've had physical contact. You know how Elizabeth talks about when Morgan crossed, he bear hugged her and she felt it in her body. Well, for me, those kinds of things have happened at Gulf Shores, Alabama. My father, after he crossed, actually put a towel around my shoulders when I was cold on the beach. I'll never forget it. And hugged me. And he was, of course, in spirit. And so I feel like at a thin place is where, and Mahatma Gandhi has a wonderful quote written in 1931 about these places. And he said, there's an indefinable, mysterious power that pervades everything. I feel it, though I do not see it. It is this unseen power that makes itself felt and yet defies all proof, because it is so unlike all that we perceive through our senses.
Wow.
And I would say for me that when I go to a thin place, I feel a connection to departed loved ones, to God, to wisdom that is completely effortless. It's a spiritual comfort place. And I would also say that doing the work I do with clients, Joe and I are going to talk about creating thin places later on today, but I've always created thin places in my office where I work with clients on Zoom or by phone. And the way you do this is with prayer and meditation, just like any thin place really is built up over time by people connecting to spirit there. And so when we work with clients all day and connect to their departed and meditate and pray there, then we are creating a thin place in our home. And I know all of you parents, you have the room perhaps that your child lived in where you go to sit and like Joe and experience that thin place there. And that's been created by your connection to that loved one. Joe, what else are we supposed to talk about? We had an outline, but that went out the window.
It went out the window as soon as we played the Beatles.
That's right.
One thing I do love to talk about is how unaware we are until we've encountered a thin place, and then we look for them, and then we find them. My friend John Hughes, I hope he's in there, in here. I was invited by a medium to come out to a spirit session, and I thought I was, there to, hang out and talk to Chris. And John Hughes was on the left side of me, and there was a lovely young lady on the right side of me. And Andrew, the medium, asked me to talk about thin places, and we did. And John's son came through with Chris to give John a message, and said he was right behind him. And on the right, there was a young woman, and she's very quiet, and she lost her husband, who was very, very close. And during the meditation, Chris wrote down the name of a song and line from the Saw Doctors, which was an Irish band in the 80s. And I hadn't thought about this song in many, many years. And Andrew was asking people to find their thin places and to find them during meditation. And Chris came to me and gave me this, and the line was, "Where the ocean kisses Ireland, the wakes upon the shore." And she started crying, and she said that she didn't know what to do with her husband's ashes, but their happiest moments were on the cliffs of Moher overlooking the Irish Sea. And that now she knows that she has to go back there, connect with him, and spread his ashes over the Irish Sea. Now, I didn't go there thinking I was going to help somebody discover a thin place, but I do find out that if I stay open, the two most important things Christopher tells me is love and service, and that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help people connect with their, specifically, children, and I do say often that, I'm a different guy than I was prior to January 3rd, 2016, and I live my life two ways. I live my life to serve God and please God and make my son proud. My sister, Marcia, who was getting ready to transition, I was with her in Naples, and I just adored her. Big source of love for me, even when I wasn't so lovable. and she was an amazing, amazing woman. And that night after she went to bed, and I went down to the sand in Naples Beach, 11 o'clock at night, and sat there and had a cigar and sat on the sand to connect with Chris. And he sent me a message. He said, "Go to Siesta Key." And I'm thinking like, oh my God, dude, I'm flying out of here at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's an hour and a half north. And I said, "I'll make a deal, Chris. I'll look at the phone. And if the beach is open, I'll go. But I'm not going to go up there and get." And of course, I opened the phone up, and it says Siesta Key open 24 hours. So a Red Bull or two later and a cigar on the way, I went there and felt him all around me, and actually got a text from a wonderful medium friend of mine that said, "Chris wants you to look up at the stars." I was laying on the beach looking up at the stars, and I know what that was all about. Chris was with a friend of his or two, nudging him, saying, I told you the old man was going to show up. But that's where we connect, we connect there because of that. I believe that energy, that door is open there. There's Siesta Key is everybody's beach. And, more people that I talk about it, the more important it is. Whenever I meet with you guys, or when I do an interview, or when I'm, writing, or when Chris is visiting me, I always have Siesta Key sand that I spread over the desk. I just think it helps me connect with what's there. Now, I will tell you that not every thin place is a thin place for me. I went to Sedona after being in Tucson and down in Sierra Vista, which is a thin place for me, and feeling Chris all over. I went to Sedona and really expected to be knocked off my skis. And I had a wonderful tour guide who was a wonderful old hippie, and just come back from a vision quest. I think that involved peyote and spiritual connect. And I loved her. She was great. And she looked at me and she said, I'm a medium. I don't tell people this all the time, but your son's been with us the entire time. So that was magnificent. But most of it, I felt very little. I really expected a lot. Now, some people will go there and that door just flies open, but for me, it wasn't, So I think there's places that we know that are shared thin places. And I think, defining the water, which is the source of everything, the moon, which is the pull, and the sand, which is as a conduit, which is kind of an amplifier or an amplifier system that allows people like me, very common, normal guys, to be able to connect. So I really want, I went to Lilydale and was disappointed in Sedona. So Lilydale is the oldest spiritual community in the country. And I didn't expect much. And I went at 3:00 in the morning thinking I was going to connect with Chris at Inspiration Stump. But what I found was, walking through the woods, I was awash with energy. I had never felt energy like this. I couldn't believe it. But since the turn of the century, mediums had been reading people in this clearing. So how many thousands of souls has come to visit? What a psychic imprint must be. And I got to the clearing where I expected to be wowed. And I put a microphone on Inspiration Stump and thinking I was going to get all this wisdom from Chris. And it was nothing from Chris. Yet the minute I started walking through those woods again, I got that wash of energy. So Chris reminds me that I'm not an expert. I'm about ankle deep in the wisdom that we're trying to all discover. And that, when spirit wants to connect, they'll connect, and who's going to connect will connect. So I think it's a monster task, but I really want everybody to try to find their thin place, whether, you create it, as Sue said, you make your own thin place, or you find an established thin place and try to connect with the tides, Sue?
I think it's every grieving mom, I'm sure, has created a thin place, because the place that we go to, even if we cry there at first, but then we start reaching out and speaking to our beautiful departed loved one, and then maybe we go back into that same space to pray or to meditate or to cry. Those emotions, even, they sort of help wear down. I always think of tears and pleas for connection, and communication as like wearing down the veil thickness until the veil can simply disappear. And one of my favorite concepts was Hemingway wrote about it, calling it a movable feast, where he talked about, if you've lived in Paris and had wonderful times with brilliant authors like he did, that you carry that with you in your heart forever, and it becomes your personal movable feast. I think of a thin place as each of our personal movable feast. So for example, even if you have to go somewhere for a business trip or with your family, you can create that movable feast, that thin place in your hotel room. And, I've been carrying with me shrines and deities in my suitcase because I've had to travel to teach different things for a long time. And I always get to the hotel room, and one of the first things I do is I'll put out, I have Lakshmi, Mother Mary, little statues, and just different pictures in a corner of a Hampton Inn hotel room, and then in the morning when I wake up to meditate, I have that little thin place there where I can go to, and it takes my mind off of earthly things and really connects me to my beloveds and to spirit guides. And so you can bring this with you wherever you go. Just have the intention, set the intention. And if you visited my home here, which I wish all of you could do, you would see there's not a room in this house that doesn't have some form of a Buddha or a Mother Mary or a meditating Jesus or something like that in it, so that when you're in that room, no matter what you're doing, you can sort of catch that image and it brings you to your sacred place, to your personal thin place. Joe, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I want to hear about Shoshone yoga retreat is what I want to hear about.
So when I was how can I say this? When I was still brokenhearted about Paul, Chrissy, Marv, and my dad crossing in my 30s, I was seeking spiritual answers. And one of the things I was drawn to was an ashram outside of Boulder, 30 minutes up in the mountains, a Hindu ashram actually, with the practices taught by Nityananda and Muktananda. Some of you know those practices, and yoga and meditation. And so I started going there and studying with the teacher there, and they have 200 acres of land. And it's one of the most sacred places I've ever been, because people walk and meditate, pray and meditate. There's shrines, there's buildings they've built. But my favorite place is they have this place at the edge of their property that overlooks a river. And there's rocks that you can sit on top of. They call it the Buddha rocks, because beneath the drop-off, they spent a year painting this enormous Buddha on that rock. And when you walk around to stand in front of it, the energy of it is astounding. And so once I was sitting on those rocks meditating, and a raven landed right in front of me. My spirit guide is Chief Fool's Crow, and he takes the form of crows and ravens to talk to me. And the raven landed literally 4 to 5 feet in front of me, and had a message for me in raven talk. But I was able to close my eyes and really absorb it and listen to what that message was. And it was all about never forgetting that I was here to connect to the veil, beyond the veil spirit, and make that my work. And at the time, that wasn't my work. I was a writer, a journalist. And it was on the Buddha rocks, listening to this raven spirit guide who was kind of yelling at me, like, what are you doing? Pay attention. This is what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And as I absorbed that message from the top of the Buddha rocks, it was instrumental in me kind of finally doing what I do today, coming out of hiding, so to speak. So that's one of my favorite thin places.
You mentioned Buddha, and this is funny. An Irish Catholic kid talking to you about Buddha, but one of my favorite explanations of religion is that John Edward, I'd seen him, I went and saw him a year ago, and it was an amazing situation. I knew Chris was there all over me. I mean, I could feel the energy, the tingle. I get tingles like I got right now in the back of my neck when Chris is around. And he's with me all the time, but when he's present and involved in this. And John, we had this wonderful, we were out by O'Hare Airport, 300 people in this room. And I knew Chris was there, and he was moving on. He was getting ready to close down his meeting. And it was like, wow, his session. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then he said, wait a minute, I have one more, and he came over and said, I got somebody named Christopher Joseph, and he's with his grandfather named Joseph. So it was, it was me and it was him. And the messages were just unbelievable. And the affirmations were just unbelievable. But one of my favorite explanations about religion, and I'm actually writing about this in the third book, is that, on your deathbed, if you're Buddhist, you're going to see Buddhist deities when you cross. When you're Catholic, you'll see. That doesn't mean that they have the priority or they have the rank. John Edward was so great. He said, we're out by O'Hare here. He said, think of all the carriers that landed O'Hare, United, American, Frontier. He said, they're all different carriers and they all arrive at the same place. And I think that's the magic of all of this. As long as our hearts are pure and we pay homage to something greater than ourselves, whether it's Yahweh, the Holy Spirit, you want to call it Mary, for me, I call often, I'm a big fan of God and I call him the source, and there's ascended masters, so I was out I was with a friend of all your guys, Craig McMahon, filming a little documentary, and he had talked about channeling Buddha. And he asked some kind of question, and he said, Buddha just put up his arms and said, Craig, I am Buddha. And so I was in a crystal shop the other day and picked up a couple of Buddhas, and I mailed one to Craig McMahon. I mailed one to my friend Alan from Sarasota, who was going through some medical stuff. And I'm actually going to grab one for Irene, Elizabeth, and Sue and mail those out because I just love the fact that I'm comforted by the existence and the knowledge that Buddha is in a place that we're all going to go to eventually, and the places are, there's an attachment that Elizabeth's going to put up that has, thin places that are all over. The Wailing Wall is a thin place. Notre Dame Cathedral is a thin place. Joan of Arc Chapel in Milwaukee. Machu Picchu is a thin place for everybody. Both my kids went there separately. I have photos of both of them overlooking Machu Picchu. So the thin places, we can seek the spiritual ones that are established. And then as Sue brought out, we can create the ones that we want to keep personal. Sacred Heart Cemetery is open 24 hours. And that's a thin place for me, but it's a thin place for everybody that visits there. And I got to tell you, I'm not telling parents anything they don't know. You meet the nicest people in cemeteries because we're all there to share love, right? And so what a perfect place that you'd think a cemetery in the middle of the night is scary, and it's not. It's really, really welcoming and loving. So one thing I think that both Sue and I'd like to do is talk to you guys and maybe comment on your thin places, and when Christopher drowned, and he drowned in a lake up in northern or in southern Wisconsin in middle of winter, and I went up there near the first year anniversary, and when I got to the lake, and I launched a Chinese lantern and threw some flowers out there. And I actually got a message from Chris that said, don't come back here. There's nothing for me here. There's nothing for you here. This is just a place. So that place got checked off as a thin place for me. It was just a place that he exited. So I think we find the places and we look for validation for the ones that we love. And if we keep our hearts open and our minds open, and I was actually driving back from there, and always been concerned about Christopher drowning in the cold. Was he unhappy? Was he miserable? And I was listening to the book by Mary C. Neal, which was Heaven and Back. And she talked about that drowning was actually a peaceful and loving way to transition. And I had to pull over, because I look like a tough guy, but I'm not. And I had to cry. And I was so grateful for her. I actually wrote her an email, prior to Helping Parents Heal, because I knew she was there, and thanked her because it changed my opinion of how Christopher left this side, you know. But I would love, unless Sue has anything more, to hear about where your thin places are, or any questions that you have for either one of us about thin places. And remember, she's the Reverend. I'm not.
I'm sure Sue has things to say, and there are people telling about their thin places, but let's go ahead and let Sue maybe speak a bit. Would you like to, Sue?
Well, I was just going to say, I want to make sure that every parent knows that even if they can't travel to a Sedona or any of these thin places that we're talking about, that literally tonight, I've got people, friends actually, who create a closet space, because that's all they have in their apartment, and turn it into their own little sanctuary, their own little sacred place of connection, using whatever loved ones things they want to put in there, and then some sacred, maybe sacred deities and incense. Everybody needs a sacred place in their house. And whether that ends up being your closet or your office where you work, I'm so blessed because my office where I work, it just starts holding the resonance of all the spirits that I've called in to connect to their beautiful moms and dads. And so each person, no matter your circumstances, you can create this thin place in your home. And if your home doesn't feel right, if you're unhappy in your home, go outside and find a place in a garden, that you can access. I remember at one point in my life after Paul died, I did a lot of moving around, and there was a public garden in Boulder that had such a thin place energy that I would go to, and it had this little bench, and it got to be that every time I showed up there and sat down, I could feel Paul sitting next to me and talking to me and counseling me. So don't feel restricted by the idea that you have to go to some outer place. We carry these thin places in our hearts when we connect to spirit. When we put out the request for connection, you are starting at that moment to open your thin place.
Beautiful.
Yes, that is beautiful. And we do have people talking about where their thin places are. It's interesting that there are a lot of people saying that cemeteries are their thin places as well, Joe. And so I think that, like you, they feel that they find a lot of peace in cemeteries.
I want to say one thing, Elizabeth, that's funny about the cemetery is that my yellow lab crossed over, who just adored Chris, and they grew up together in May, and it's really unusual. It's strange for me to go there without her. She was always there with me. Got hit by a skunk one time with me, but that's an entirely other. I decided that when she transitioned, we made a little shrine for her downstairs with her ashes, and then half her ashes I just dug a hole next to Christopher's grave and put her in there. So when I go there, I can visit both of them, and I know they're together. I've been told it. I experience it. He's told me, so, the graveyard with my son and my dog is a double thin place for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. Well, we have people who are saying that they've been to Machu Picchu, Crater Lake, Sedona, and many others, but have not felt any different than usual, but nature brings peace. So that's what Valerie is saying. I think that as Sue says, it's important to create your own thin place, because it's true that there are sacred places like Machu Picchu, like Sedona, and all of these other places, but Joe didn't necessarily feel any different while he was in Sedona, even though that there are 7 vortexes in Sedona, and it's an incredibly uplifting place. It's not necessarily there that you're going to be connecting with your child. I think that they want to connect with us the easiest place possible, and a place in your home. And you don't have to worry about moving homes either. That's something that I think we've gotten a lot of questions lately on Helping Parents Heal about needing to change homes for financial reasons, or just wanting to change and worrying about leaving our kids behind. Maybe Sue,
That's so important because all of you know, you've been to the conference, you've seen the videos, because the quantum physicists say time and space are happening all at once in the divine realms. And certainly our spirits are not limited by any place where their body once lived. In fact, they are completely free of the body the minute they are even preparing for death. Their soul begins to leave the body. And so you are never beholden to a space where your loved one once lived. In fact, what I have found, because I had to move right after Paul died, I was 29 and renting, and suddenly I had to get out of that apartment within 2 weeks, and so I was worried about that exact thing. And then Paul showed me an apartment in a dream the night before, and I had all these other apartments I was going to look for, but Paul was guiding where I was going to live. So stay very open to how your departed child might be trying to help you find your next home. And in a dream, Paul showed me this apartment that had all these windows and 2 levels. It was a very specific dream about this apartment. And in the morning, I had a list of other places to go, and I decided on a spur of the moment. I saw the address, this address that had a rent sign on it, and pulled in and walked in, and it was exactly the apartment that Paul had shown me in the dream. And I ended up living there for 10 years. So like the spirits know when you have to move, they're going to go ahead and find the place for you. and they're going to guide you to you be, whether it's through a realtor or through a dream, you're going to find the place where they want you to be. You can trust that 100%, and they'll be with you.
that is so beautiful. And I agree with you 100%. And there's Angela is saying that she's also heard that there are thin times of the year, and she'd like to know what you think. Also, lighting candles and other rituals to connect is.
Well, let me just say one thing. Everybody's date of angelversary, that's a thin day, because that is when the veil is so thin between you and your departed, as on the anniversary of their crossing, their graduation. You will feel them, hear them, know them in every way on that angelversary. And so that's when your feelings get stirred up, but also because they're around you, helping clear that pain out of your heart. Crying is a good thing. It gets the pain out of your heart.
That's
And I just love the numerology, Sue, and I love all those, because it's a whole awakening to me that I wasn't aware of, that you brought me, to an awareness to, and I'm very much, everything that I do, I've picked up along the way, usually from people who've taught me, teachers. And so, you look at me with the kind of bent nose and the brush cut, I don't look like a guy that wears mala beads, that has crystals on my desk, that lights candles, the little smoke. I don't have a cigar going right now. I've got sage going, because when I do that, it brings me into a consciousness, and it raises my level of consciousness. And when we're connecting, and I channel Christopher here, always 3 o'clock in the morning, always 3 o'clock, between 3 and 4, I channel him here in this room that was his room. And I do everything that I can to enhance that. I align my chakras. There's a wonderful chakra chart and steps to connect that's on in my website at joemcquillen.net. And, I didn't develop those. I stole those, recreated them, and put them out there as service. But I do the same routine. And then, and it puts me into a flow where I can raise my level of consciousness. Chris can lower his level of consciousness, connect with his psychic slug of a dad, and then he can give me messages, that I can pass on. And the first book was mostly about him guiding me, and now it's mostly him sharing messages to share with you. So it's wisdom from another son, from another child, to parents who hurt just like we all do.
Right. Joe, let's talk about our the thin place we experienced together when we did, for example, your soul regression, because I think that's
Right.
so cosmic and out there that kind of blows my mind. But some of you know that I lead these soul regression sessions where I'll take someone into the divine realms. First, they'll drop into another life. But the best part really for me is when we're hanging out in the divine realms, connecting to your spirit guides and your departed. And I experience these with you so completely. And Joe and I were talking today because when he did his, and there's this place, and I wasn't even trained this way. It's just the way that it has happened, that when the person walks through the tunnel to the light, there's a stone circle, which is the first like landing place where they sit with their spirit guide and their departed loved one. And we have this kind of opening conversation. And I said, Joe, you remember when we went there, that was a thin place. And he described it, and it was exactly the way I've always seen it.
It was
So
a
there
mini Stonehenge, right?
Yes,
And you said, oh my
exactly.
God, that's exactly it.
Right. So we can create, the point of this is to tell you, we can create a thin place in our travels in the divine. So before you go to bed tonight, you can say to your beloved child, let's meet in the stone circle at the first level of opening in the divine realms where we arrive after we walk through the tunnel. I'll meet you there tonight, beautiful son or daughter, and we'll sit in that circle and we'll laugh about the day and we'll have an amazing conversation. And you can do that guided meditation and go there and hold that space in your mind and see it and meet with your departed and then go to sleep. And in your dreams, you may also then visit that place and be with them. And it's so powerful.
You know, Chris once told me, he said, Pop, we share the same moon. And that was just such a moving sentence. So when I look at the moon, I know that I'm sharing that with him. And that, you know, so I'll look up and know that he's looking at the same moon and we're connecting, you know, and that's really special, you know.
I guess the real end result of all of this, you guys, is that this world is so easy to cross through. We can be sitting here, right here, talking about this, and we're creating a thin place where we're sitting in front of our computer. And you know that's true because you've all had that experience when the medium gives you a reading and you suddenly feel your spirit of your child with you, or just you get a sign. The veil evaporates. You are simply then connected to spirit. And because we're also aware of this now and we're working on it and the kids are working on it so much, lifting us up, the veil is getting so thin. I think any day now we're going to wake up and see all of our beloveds. The veil will be gone. Then, of course, we got to learn how to navigate with that down here. But I'm up for that lesson. So,
you know, the one thing I do want to say to Larry Ebright is that our kids had their own path. They had their soul contract. Now, I'm the first one to say that I want to renege on that contract and renegotiate it, but they had their contract, and there's nothing I could have done could have stopped Christopher from going to that lake house that night. Sally has regrets, you know, but there's a path. And one thing we understand is how great God is and how small we are. And that, you know, I'm just following the breadcrumbs. But, you know, Chris has a contract that's completely separate. I got brought into it, but there's nothing that I could have done to have changed Christopher's destiny. You know, and look how many people he's touching now. Yeah. Look at the difference he's making in this world.
Yeah. And I read a chat just now. I think it's important that we talk about it. This Karen is saying that her favorite thin place is in her vivid dreams, where she connects to her son and can feel him and smell him physically. We all know that kind of a dream. It's a dream vision. It's a gift from our departed, and we feel physically connected to them in that space. And that, of course, is another thin place that we're creating, or they're creating for us in our sleep and pulling us into that. So we have so many ways to go to those thin places, whether it's through our dream visions or our meditations during the day, or our calling out to spirit, or our going for a walk in nature, walking on a beach, sitting on a beach. This is a beautiful life when we realize that there are portals to the divine wherever we are.
You know what Aeschylus said, that in our sleep, pain that cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until our misery and against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God.
Beautiful, Joe.
That is beautiful. I want to kind of just say about dreams and dream visits that you can either imagine that circle, but you can also think of a place that you absolutely loved being with your child when they were here in the physical. And that place was on a lake in our boat for me. And before going to bed, I put a glass of water beside our bed, because water apparently is a good way to allow energy to move. And so I asked for a dream visit from Morgan, and I asked him to meet me on the boat. And so you could do it the way that Sue's talking about. You can also just imagine a place that you spent the happiest times with your children, and ask them to meet you there. And I can assure you that it happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen the first night. You have to keep working at it and asking them to meet you. It is really good to do a guided meditation before you go to bed as well, to allow you to feel that you are in a place to meet with your children as well. But it's so interesting to see all of the places that people find are those thin places that they're able to meet with their children. And it's true. So that is exactly right. Being able to understand that there are these portals to be able to connect with our children. Obviously, there are lots of ways to connect with our children in spirit, but knowing that these portals exist, and we just need to be able to find out where they are for us. And if they don't already exist, to create that portal.
Elizabeth, I'm feeling called to just do a 30-second little prayer that everyone here can use to call in their spirits to their thin places before they go to sleep. Can I just channel that through?
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Oh, beloved spirits, all of the departed who cherish us, who we cherish, we call on you with open hearts, with quiet minds, with complete assurance that you are here to help us, to love us, to heal us. And so we rest easy in the night, trusting that you will carry us in our dreams, that you will carry us to sacred places, that you will show us your physical self so that we recognize you, feel you, touch you, smell you, and know that there is no death, and that you carry your agreement, your relationship with us, helping us wake up here. And there is nothing we have to do except trust. And so it is.
Amen.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness. That was just so nice. Well, we have 5 minutes left. So I'm sure that both of you would like to maybe wrap up with a little bit from Joe first, if you'd like to. And I see that obviously Larry got your message and he thanks you for it. Thank you for doing that. And anything that you'd like to let the parents know about these thin places.
You know, I think Susan Giesman said it best in the title of one of her books, that's still right here. And I'm a simple guy, you know, on this amazing journey. But I just want to end with quoting Vivian Green, who says, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Thanks for sharing this dance with me tonight.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. And
Thank you.
Reverend Sue.
And I just want to say that all of you are such beautiful, highly evolved souls yeah, you signed up for a heck of a life plan, but that's because your beloved departed was going to be your teacher and take you on this journey. And they're still our teachers. They are traveling with us. They brought you here tonight. So you can trust that you're in good hands. They're in the driver's seat. All we have to do is snap in with the seatbelt for the ride and let them take us where we need to go.
Wow.
And they're in charge of our thin places. So it's just an honor to talk to you guys. I love y'all so much.
Oh, beautiful. You two are just such uplifting, wonderful people. I think it's so much fun to have the two of you in the same Zoom room together.
I enjoy it. I thought it was great.
Joe is my brother, definitely. From
No doubt
another
about
life.
it.
Yeah.
Say thank you in the chat box. Oh my goodness gracious. So many thank yous, but we always ask everyone to unmute and say thank you and good night themselves in person. So if you guys would like to do that, you should be able to.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Sue. This was a wonderful evening.
Thanks.
So uplifting.
Unless I've done something wrong with the security. Oh, it's not allowing.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, so we have one person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
That was
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good
Thank
night,
you so
everybody.
much. Good night.
Thank you very
Wonderful.
much.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you, Joe and Sue.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Right.
Love you guys.